Hey guys, what's up? Shah here, and today I'm going to be taking a look at my talent tree in 8.3 for Guardian Druid. I wanted to get this out there and start talking about what I plan on running and what I am running for especially higher keys. I've already attempted a 15 and a 16. Unfortunately, I didn't get them in time. Still working on the Awakened affix. Also wasn't really planning to push, just more or less getting our 15s done, just so we get our maximum loot from the end of the week. But going forward, I'm looking to start pushing those keys and trying to get Keystone Master pretty early this season with plans to push higher in IO. So I want to talk about these talents really quick. And when I say really quick, it'll probably be a long video. But I'm going to break down all these talents and why I run them and why I don't run them. And maybe this can give you some guidance on what you want to run. I want to talk about when there's niche situations along with the cookie cutter playstyle, along with talents that you just avoid in general. So I'm going to take a dive right in. Let's get started. So for our first tier here, or the 15 talent row, we have 3 talents that we're going to be looking at. We got Brambles, we got Blood Frenzy, and we got Bristling Fur. I should probably go to a rest zone while I talk about these. But, so, with these talents, there are pretty much 2 options. I guess the first one that I'm going to start with is Bristling Fur on a 40-second cooldown. Now, for 8 seconds, you're going to be taking an insane amount of... You're going to get an insane amount of rage gen for a short window based on the damage you're taking. Typically in keys, you're going to be taking a pretty insane amount of damage consistently, which will cause you to rage cap. And because of this, Bristling Fur is not a good choice for dungeons almost ever. If you're ever rage capped, that means you're not maximizing mitigation or damage, and you just simply don't have enough globals to be able to use to make use of this talent successfully. Plus the fact that it's a 40-second cooldown, but only an 8-second window of this rage gen is pretty rough. Maybe if this was a shorter cooldown, or if it was maybe a shorter cooldown with less damage, you can kind of use it as an active mitigation to set yourself up. But because it lasts for 8 seconds, you're just rage capped basically for those 8 seconds, which is just not good. So Bristling Fur is basically, you're never going to run it. If you're running it, don't. The next 2 is Blood Frenzy and Brambles. I run Brambles because Blood Frenzy, not that it was ever nerfed, but Guardian Druid got a pretty significant buff to the rage gen coming into 8.2. So we don't really need this talent. It's not necessary anymore. Thrash generates an additional 2 rage every time it deals damage. It's great on bigger pulls. It has some synergies with other talents in the tree. In the tree. Wow. Rod's going to make fun of me for that. But this will allow you to have pretty good rage gen, especially in bigger pulls. Has some synergies, but Brambles is going to be your best bang for its buck, or however the saying goes. So every time you take damage, you're going to absorb and then reflect 884 damage from each attack. If I'm not mistaken, this scales off of versatility. So the higher your verse, the higher this is going to, the higher threshold that it's going to have. And then also as an active for this effect, while Barkskin is active, your Brambles just pulses out AoE damage. So this is super nice as an AoE, because you'll see here it's pulsing this kind of effect. This will be doing AoE damage. It'll help you hold threat. It's also going to act as a defensive for that 20% damage reduction. Just an all-around solid choice in both higher and lower keys. This is going to allow you to pull bigger and have more damage in lower keys, and in higher keys this is going to help you stay alive, especially through magical damage, because it's from every attack. It's not from just autos. It's not from just melee. This also affects spells as well, so it helps you keep aggro on range. It also helps you damage range, and it mitigates magic effects. So Brambles is going to be your choice bet. Blood Frenzy also is not a bad choice, but Brambles is the way to go. Alright, cool. Now the second talent tree, or the 30 talent tier, however you want to look at it. There's 3 choices. Realistically, there's 1. I'm going to start here. Ursul's Vortex. So essentially, I don't really want to read all this, but essentially it's a 50% slow within an 8-yard radius. It'll look a little something like this. If you haven't seen it before, it's a little like Typhoon looking thing. Actually, that's Typhoon. But Ursul's Vortex is going to be an AoE slow. This is going to help with us kiting. It's going to help slow enemies. Not all classes that you're going to be running with have access to an AoE slow. Guardian Druid brings this to their toolkit. It also can pseudo as a mass grip, which is super nice. What I mean by this is you can put down Ursul's Vortex. A little later we have Typhoon. Typhoon, then you can knock everything out of the Vortex to grip it all up. This is insanely strong for AoE scenarios. classes preferred things as tight as possible, so it helps you bring some casters into the pack if needed. It helps you tighten up melee packs to get full benefit from things like Essence of the Focusing Iris or Blood of the Enemy. So DPS are really going to like you for using Ursul's Vortex. Also, when you start kiting, this doesn't mean the melee have to chase you and the range don't have to continue moving and stopping their cast to keep up. Ursul's Vortex will keep things in place for a fairly long time and allow your healer also time to catch up if you're low. Ursul's Vortex is by far just the best choice. Wild Charge isn't as practical. You're often only in bear form, and having a charge that doesn't generate rage like our warrior counterpart isn't beneficial. You often won't be in CAD form. Travel form, the leap from it is just really not that practical. Going out of bear form in a dungeon is just not practical in most situations and is very hard to do. So Wild Charge is not great. Same reason for Tiger's Dash. Not only that it replaces Dash, which is just horrible. Dash is already strong by itself. You don't need anything else. Oftentimes when you're using Dash, it's to get from point A to point B a little bit faster, but it's not going to regard pulls. Oftentimes you'll use Dash if you wipe, or if you're just trying to be in stealth but keep up with other people like who might be on a mount and a shroud, stuff like that. You might use Dash. But for the most part, there's no reason to ever take Tiger's Dash as a talent. It's okay in world like content, but for Mythic dungeons, Ursul's Vortex is by far the way to go. Speaking of obvious choices, Resto Affinity in your 45 talent tier is going to be the choice to go with. Oftentimes, Feral Affinity, you're very rarely going to be in the Affinity doing the Affinity spells. I've seen some people try to like do pulls using a Star Surge to start in Moonkin form, then going into Bear form, but you're not getting the threat that you generate from that Star Surge when in Moonkin form. And then the increased the increased range on your abilities is really not that great. It's not that practical. Like there's a few very small instances where I wish I had Balance Affinity, but I can't justify it because the rest of the dungeon I would want Resto Affinity. Feral Affinity, same thing. You're not going to be in cat form doing damage. You're a tank. You're tanking. You're a little busy. Rake, Rip, and Ferocious Bite aren't very strong in Guardian Druid. And like you're only going to take this in raid to do damage. You're not going to take it in dungeons. You're going to be in bear form 95% of the time. Resto Affinity, like I said, obvious choice. Ysera's Gift, extremely strong for Guardian Druids, is 1.5% of your maximum health. While in bear form, 1.5% of your maximum health is pretty large. I'm sitting at about a 645k base, let alone without like stam buffs and other things that are going to be affecting my overall health pool. So Resto Affinity is going to easily be the best thing to take. So it also gives you access to things like Swiftmend and Rejuvenation. Rejuvenation, very strong going into pull. You can rejuve yourself and then go into pull. Now you have about 12 seconds of a hot on you. It doesn't hit for an insane amount, but it's a little additional healing. You can also put it on your allies going into pull. You can also Swiftmend yourself. Swiftmend, if it crits, is about 50%-ish of your health pool. I do run a high crit build. This is mainly for this reason. A Swiftmend will crit me for 150k. Like that's insane. Now this is obviously going to be amplified in a dungeon setting. It's scaled off of our agility, but a Swiftmend has saved my life before more times than I can count. In a dungeon, good Guardian Druids will learn how to Resto Weave. I don't know if this is like I don't know if I've coined this term or if it's just maybe something people say or no one says it and maybe it won't stick at all. But how Resto Druids kitty weave during pulls. I like to Resto Weave. So typically after I drop an Ursul's Vortex and I'm beginning to kite, I will Swiftmend myself if I'm not at max health. And then what this does is it saves me a Frenzied Regen charge when I do have to tank. A Swiftmend is pretty much an on-demand Frenzied Regen, but you have to go out of bear form to use it. So very strong. If you can get this down properly and learn how to kite and use Swiftmend, very strong. Resto Affinity also will help with the fixes like bursting after combat ends and people are taking a lot of damage. You can help the healer catch up. Just all around great. It also has a synergy with a talent or an Azerite trait that I like to take as well that I will cover in a future video probably. So next tier, 60. All great, good choices here. Depending on the comp you're running with, you'll take different either of these talents. I've used all of these before. I prefer Typhoon. But starting with Mighty Bash. Mighty Bash is great. 5-second stun, single target. It's like a Fist of Justice from a Paladin. But because I normally run with classes that can stun, stuns do DR on mobs. Single target stun, not as powerful as an AoE stun. Also, this can DR. Either it'll DR if someone else stuns before me, or if I stun, it'll DR future stuns. So I just want to be careful about taking this. If you're running with classes that don't have a lot of stuns, this could be a good choice. But oftentimes, you're going to be better off taking more or less Typhoon. Mass Entangle I'm going to take in very certain dungeons. Things like High Tyrannical Temple of Sethralis to keep snakes away on, or to keep ads out of boss fights. Very strong for that. Oftentimes, like maybe Harlan Sweet and Freehold as well for the bombers that come down if you're not playing with a druid, a Resto Druid or something like that, of something of that nature that can keep those ads away. This is going to be a good choice. Oftentimes, Typhoon is going to be your baseline choice because it's not only it creates a gap. So when you do need a kite, you can create that gap to start kiting without using Ursul's Vortex. You can use this in synergy with Ursul's Vortex to do a pseudo mass grip like I mentioned earlier by putting down the Ursul's Vortex and then Typhooning. If all these Pandaren are grouped up, I can drop the Ursuls, and then if I knock them back with Typhoon, it's going to knock them out of the circle and grip them all to the center. So DPS are going to be able to do a lot of damage when this happens. It's not going to be as effective for kiting because you just sacrifice 2 things out of your toolkit, but if you're comfortable or you don't think you need to kite, this can be used as an offensive tool as well. The cooldowns they fairly line up. I mean, it's a 30-second and a minute, so you can Typhoon twice every Ursul's Vortex, or per every Ursul's Vortex cooldown. So this also acts as an interrupt. When you do knock back, it interrupts everything, and then again, creating that gapping is going to be huge for kiting. So Typhoon is going to be your choice here. Now for the 75 row, or I guess your tier 5, however you want to call it. Pretty decent row. This is going to be your damage row. It's going to increase your either single target damage, your AoE damage, or just have a cooldown. Now, Soul of the Forest, we're going to just ignore. Mangle there's other abilities that do more damage. Your Thrash does almost as much damage as your Mangle does. Mangle only hits 1 target. Now this can increase that. It increases your single target damage, but if you're looking to increase your single target damage, you're going to take Galactic Guardian. Your Moonfire, when it procs, is just going to do crazy numbers. I've seen my Moonfires crit for as much as a Mangle would crit anyways. And then the periodic damage is going to be increased as well, and it's going to generate rage. So this gives you an additional way to generate rage, which isn't as much of a problem, but it's because we take this talent and not Soul of the Forest. So an extra 8 rage generator plus a 300% increased direct damage when this procs. So oftentimes in dungeons and keys, your highest damage is going to be your Moonfire dot. So Galactic Guardian is extremely powerful, especially because it will, off the global cooldown, apply Moonfires to random targets that you're damaging. So very, very strong. Soul of the Force we're going to ignore. Galactic Guardian we're going to take most of the time. Incarnation, this is more of a flavor talent. You can take it if you want. My issue with Incarnation is that it's on a 3-minute cooldown. It can't be reduced by anything, even things like Vision of Perfection. More on that later. But Incarnation is extremely, extremely powerful. It allows you to spam Thrash and Mangle. Mangle cleaves. Thrash doesn't have a cooldown, and you can taunt on cooldown. So it's really good on skittish weeks. It's very good for picking up aggro in case you lose it. If you go into a pull and you die, or your Demon Hunter rips aggro or something like that, you can pop Incarn and just start spam taunting things while thrashing on cooldown. It's pretty nice. So it's more of a flavor thing if you prefer this. Also, you're extremely tanky in Incarnation. Incarnation gives you a 15% damage reduction, or increased armor, essentially. So 15% increased armor, which means an increased damage reduction on physical attacks. So in things like Freehold or Underrot, very, very strong choice. And if you're planning your pulls accordingly and using this on cooldown, or you're doing a big pull with Incarn, it's great. Incarn caps out when you're doing higher dungeons. Higher dungeons, Incarnation, you won't have enough. You won't have enough uptime on it to make it effective. Like, it's an 18% uptime typically if you're smashing it on cooldown. And typically in larger dungeons, even if you're pulling really big, 30 seconds often isn't... Pulls are lasting longer than 30 seconds, and as soon as Incarn falls, you're going to feel it. And you're going to either have to start kiting, or you're going to just die without Incarn and having Galactic Guardian with additional rage gen. So it's a good choice. But Galactic Guardian is going to be typically your take. But really, realistically, I won't judge you for using Incarn if you're using Incarnation. There are sometimes I do like to use it, typically in lower keys. But next tier, there's some good talents that synergize well with Incarn, and that would be Earth Warden. Earth Warden is something that I like to take, mainly because I use Vision of Perfection as a major. That's a little bit of a spoiler for a future video that I'm going to be doing. But Earth Warden, extremely potent with Incarnation, with the ability to spam Thrash. So whenever you do direct damage with Thrash, so every time you hit it, For every target you hit, stacking up to 3 times, you're going to get a 30% damage reduction on the next auto attack. Auto attacks are going to be the majority of the damage you're taking throughout a key, which means Earth Warden is a lot of effective healing. This does count as an absorb to the attack, so when you're looking at meters, Earth Warden will pop up as a heal. So the damage reduction you're doing. On hard-hitting bosses, things like the Soul Goliath in Waker's Manor, or Mashimba in King's Rest, these very hard-hitting slow bosses are going to really get weakened by Earth Warden. So there's a lot of times bosses that normally will destroy tanks because they're just tank busters. Earth Warden makes them just an absolute joke. If you guys have watched my stream or seen any of some of my Waycrest videos, I sometimes hold the Soul Goliath and the Waycrest, the boss in Waycrest Manor. I never have to run him through fire just because of how strong Earth Warden is. It's gonna like effectively do like 20k HPS. Super strong talent. Also in AoE pulls, you're gonna have basically effective uptime on it, especially when Incarnation either procs or you're gonna get it from the talent. So just baseline, super good. It's also passive, so you don't have to think about it. I mean, these are all passive, but the other 2 talents are also decent if you're looking for. In lower keys, I like to run Survival of the Fittest. It has a very, very good synergy with Brambles. It reduces the cooldown of your Bark Skin and Survival Instincts by 33%, so it makes your Bark Skin a 1-minute cooldown, and it makes your Survival Instincts a 2.66 minute cooldown, so 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So if you're going for more of a cooldown based pulls, like chaining Survival Instincts and then using Bark Skin, super good. You're going to get a lot of effective damage with Brambles as your on-use effect. A lot of fun in low keys, not as effective in higher keys, because Survival Instincts unfortunately just is a super long cooldown that you can't reduce in any way, shape, or form. So you're going to go splat outside of your cooldowns when using Survival of the Fittest. But again, really fun in low keys. If you're doing like 10s, great talent. If you're doing like 15s, 20s, higher than that, not the talent of choice. Guardian of Elune, typically this will not be used. Oftentimes this is going to be best in dungeons with a lot of high magical damage because it's going to increase the healing of your next Frenzied Regeneration by 20% after you use Mangle. This is kind of this is an interesting talent to get used to because you have to get used to not using Frenzied Regen or Mangle or Iron Fur until you Mangle, which on a 6-second cooldown sometimes is a little punishing. That means like Frenzied Regen, you can't spam it back to back. You can't Frenzied and then 3 seconds later Frenzied again because you want to get the best use out of it. So eventually what you have to keep in mind is that you have to Mangle then Frenzied and then wait 6 seconds for Mangle to come back up, or you have to wait for that proc. Now it has a lot of synergy with some Azerite traits, which again, like I've said before, I'm going to talk about it in a different video when I do break down a lot of the Azerite traits that Guardian Druids can or will use. But that's something to keep in mind, is that you don't want to use your mitigations until you Mangle. But there's a very kind of like cool ebb and flow effect with it, and the healing that it increases is just absolutely insane. Unfortunately, I don't have any of like dungeons pulled up because I was just doing a lot of world content. But Frenzied Regen is one of your biggest heals. It's one of your top heals throughout a dungeon, so having that increased by 20% is just going to help the healer out a lot more. And again, in magical dungeons where you can't really mitigate magical damage with Iron Fur, obviously, Frenzied Regen and Guardian of Elune is going to be a good choice. But again, Earth Warden, probably your best choice. The last talent tree, this 100 talent tree, or tier 8, if I can count, 7? I don't know, 7. I'm really disappointed in this row. Normally the 100 talent tree row is like big cooldowns, really cool effects, good abilities that you can kind of interchange. Like on Shaman, at least I main Shaman for raid. We have like Ascendance and Stormkeeper, 2 very cool abilities, very strong abilities. Guardian Druid don't really get anything. We get, I guess I'll start with Ren and Tear. This is going to be cookie cutter. You should never take anything else in a dungeon, like ever. Just like Bristling Fur, I will judge you if you take Pulverize or Lunar Beam. Ren and Tear, again, has a lot of synergy with Earth Warden. It has a lot of synergy with Incarnation. It has a lot of synergy with Blood Frenzy if you're taking it, and or Brambles, kind of. Every time you thrash, and for each stack of the bleed that the enemy has, stacking up to 3 times, you get a 2% damage reduction. This means 18 seconds into the pull, or I guess 12 seconds into the pull, you have a 6% damage reduction against everything that you're hitting. You can't pass this up. Pulverize is a 9% damage reduction, but it consumes 2 of your thrash stacks to do pretty much as much damage as one of your mauls. And it's just not worth sacrificing the damage and the threat that you're gaining from the bleed stacks that you have to have a 9% damage reduction. And plus it's a single target ability. It does take up a global. So instead of spamming Thrash and Swipe and Mangles and like using Frenzied Regen like you should, you're adding another global ability that has single target that realistically is an extra 3% DR on a single target. If you're pulling 10 things, there's no way you can go around to, you can't apply at least 2 Thrashes and then go around single target pulverizing everything. Like it's not effective. And then you're not getting the damage reduction against other things. So it's a single target damage reduction. It's good in raid. Don't get me wrong. It's great in raid. Most people take this in raid. Not practical in keys whatsoever. Lunar Beam. The issue with Lunar Beam is that it summons it. Well, there's a lot of issues with it. The healing is so horrible. The damage is also horrible. The cooldown is way too long. And then also, it keeps you're stuck in one place. So Rend and Tear is going to be... Look, I don't even have my bars. Like, I don't even know where this ability is. I have to, like, open up my spellbook to find it. So, Lunar Beam, like, it's kind of cool looking. Like, it calls down this, like, ray of light to your location. Now, I'm getting healed for 100k, which is, have mind you, 18% of my health pool. It's not even a full Frenzied Regen. It's on a minute and it's a minute and 10-second cooldown. And you have to stay in that spot to get effect from it. Oftentimes in dungeons, like I've already mentioned before with Ursal's Vortex and Typhoon, you're going to be kiting. Really? Oh my god, I have to stay with this talent for a minute. So you're kiting. So Rend and Tear, obvious choice. So again, like that's what I said, I'm disappointed with this tree. Or at least this row. The tree's not so bad. Like there's some choices that we can take. We could take Wild Charge, we could take Blood Frenzy, we can take Mass Entangle, Mighty Bash, we could take Incarn, we can take any of these row. Like there's options, which is super nice about the Guardian tree. And a lot of these have synergies depending on your build. Like I can tell you there's a cookie cutter build, but realistically there's a cookie cutter build because of the Azerite traits that I'm running. When it comes to, you could take other talents. I'm really trying to change this. Based on the Azerite traits you're running, you can take different things. There is practical builds with Survival of the Fittest, not maybe pushing the high keys, and there's obviously going to be a meta, but you can take realistically a lot of these different talents. Your tree can look very different to mine. So I hope this helps. This is kind of a pseudo, I was bored and I feel like talking about my talent tree. So going forward, I plan on doing a few more videos. I want to kind of break down stat weights a little bit more. I did it in 8.2, but I want to talk about the 2 or 3 different builds that people are playing currently with stat weights that you're going to see here on my screen. I'm also going to talk about, I'm going to do a video breaking down all of the Azerite traits and when you're going to use them, when they're good, which ones are most effective. And I'm going to be talking about most of them. Guardian Druids have some good traits. Druids in general have some good traits that can be used in a lot of different trees. Oftentimes you'll see Guardian Druids taking balance traits and Resto traits. You'll see Resto Druids taking balance traits. You'll see Boomkins taking, well, Boomkin traits, but you get the point, is that there's a lot of cool traits that we can take. And then I'm going to break down essences again. I did a predictions video, but I'm going to talk about, I'm going to break down the essences a little bit further. I'm going to go through each and every one and talk about when and when you shouldn't use them. So I look forward to those. If you guys are looking forward to those, please hit subscribe. I'm going to try to post those in the next couple weeks here, especially early in this new season, season 4. But I hope you guys enjoy, and I will catch you guys in the next one.